Hello and welcome everybody. We're going to get started in just a moment. We've just opened the floodgates and you would all now be seeing three floating heads on your computer screen. I'm just opening up the chat so that you will all be able to speak with one another. So first things first, my name is Trent McLaren. I'm your host for this session today. Session is brought to you by both ApprovalMax and Weel, talking about mastering financial control. Huge topic in 2023, and you're all here because you're interested in the topic and how it relates to your business. You're either an SME or you're an accountant or a bookkeeper servicing SMEs on a day-to-day basis. But before we get started, I want to make sure that you can hear us and see us okay. So my question, and I've just muted myself by accident. My first question is to see that you can hear and see. So in the chat, if you can just say, hey, Trent, I can see you, I can see Brendan, I can see Marianne. That would be fantastic. Feel free to tell us where in the world you are, if it's warm, hot, or cold. These are the things I'm interested in. You can also tell me if you've got a cup of tea, that's always good, or a coffee. Thank you, Scott, for your comment. You can see and hear okay. Awesome. How about everyone else? There's quite a lot of you. Thank you, Ross. New Zealand, love that. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's the weather in New Zealand, Priscilla? Is it cold? I'm imagining it's cold. Lucinda, also in Sydney. Yes, it is brisk today, isn't it?
Yes.
Wet in Perth. Justin, I'm so sorry to hear that. So as we get started, and I can see the chat is firing off, feel free to tell us what the weather's like while you're going. It actually, Perth, cold, coffee. James, you sound like we would get along. I love coffee in cold, wet weather. New South Wales on Wiradjuri country, freezing cold. Thanks, Scott. Freezing. Is anyone warm today? It doesn't seem like it. So to kick us off, we've got Brendan Lucas, who's representing ApprovalMax. You are head of accounting, brand ambassador. Am I getting this right, Brendan?
Yeah, head of accounting. That's me for the Asia Pacific region for ApprovalMax.
Awesome. And you also run your own accounting firm. You want to tell us a bit about that as well?
Yeah, so I'm the owner of Next Dimension Accounting. So we've got about 18 staff. Based primarily out of Sydney, and we work with non-for-profits and small business owners, working from bookkeeper to CFO. Love
it. Very cool. And Marianne or Maz, as I know you like to go by sometimes, welcome. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your role and your background as well?
Thank you. Yes, Trent. Maz is absolutely fine. Marianne's too long and very old-fashioned, and I don't like people to think that I'm that old. So Maz is absolutely fine. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. Maz, I'm the partner manager at Weel, have been here now for just coming up 2 years. Prior to that, I've actually been in the accounting and payroll space for, really don't want to say, but I'll say 30 plus years. Have also had my own business for 10 years dealing with accounting and payroll. So a space that I'm very, very familiar with, and one that I love. Being at Weel has been awesome. It's sort of tied in a lot of the things I've done in the past and brought it all together. So yeah, that's me.
Love it. Very good. Thanks for being here. And where are you both dialing in from, and how is your weather now that I've asked everyone else?
Well, I'm in Sydney, and yes, it is very cool.
And awesome. I'm in Sydney as well, in the Sutherland Shire, and it's also cold.
Yeah, Sutherland Shire versus the Northern Beaches. That's pretty cool.
Well, I was going to say, actually, all three of us are in like the north, east, and the south. So there's a very clear representation of Sydney today. Except for the west. We're missing the west. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Someone here from Western Sydney, put your hand up. You can be our representative for Sydney today. Today's topic, just to kick off. So I always start the session. Lucinda's in the west. Okay. I always start the session with housekeeping. So this session is recorded. So you're going to get to play back all this fun little banter when you hear this. And the chat is there. The Q&A is there. Please use it. So if you have a question for our panel and discussion, if you've got a thought, feel free to add that to the conversation. So my job is to help make this conversation important, impactful, and actually what you want to hear about today. So if you've got something you want asked, put it into the chat, put it into the Q&A. Let me put our panel under the grill, as I like to say, to help give you the best information possible. Now, we're talking about mastering your financial control, and there's a big reason we're talking about that. In 2022, the statistic I pulled up before, there was over $23 million lost, impacted by false invoicing and scams for Australian SMEs. So this was an article I picked up by a Smart Company. They published this only in April. That's a huge problem. And I think we all see this. We all get text messages. We all get emails that we don't want to get. You know, I remember in previous roles, I've had the CEO emailing saying, hey, Trent, I need you to do something really important for me. You need to go down to the supermarket, buy gift cards, and then send all the details to me when you're ready. It was a really weird thing because the boss was sitting next to me and I was like, did you just send me this email? And he's like, no, I didn't. But this happens every single day. And unfortunately, people do get caught out. Even when you think, oh, I'll never fall for that. That's dumb. That's stupid. We all saw what happened with the Optus scandal. I actually had my best mate talk to me about how he got duped, where the people on the call were actually already in his account, but they were just confirming details they didn't have access to at the time. And it wasn't until it was too late, he'd been locked out and all these different things happened, that he was impacted. And he considered himself a smart person. But you can be a really smart person and still have these scammers adapt to how you work. They literally make millions of dollars in this. This is their job. They're quite good at it if you let them, and they're always looking for a different way in. So mastering financial control today in the talk is, how do we prep for that? Now, obviously, sessions hosted by Weel and ApprovalMax, you both have great systems that aid in this process, but I've challenged both of our panelists to talk through practically, what is it that's going to help you? What are you taking away from this conversation that you can implement in your business or in your clients' businesses on the back of this? So I guess first things first, Brendan, I'll start with you, obviously wearing your ApprovalMax hat as well as your accounting firm. But when you hear these sort of statistics around the invoice scams, the fraud, firstly, how does that make you feel? Like, how are you mentally prepping for this kind of thing? And how has that changed as the industry has evolved and these scams have become more elaborate?
Yeah, look, number of feelings, almost could be a counselling session, Trent. So, look, I think I've had a couple of clients where they've been burnt in the past, and so look, it's devastating, right? Whether you're a non-for-profit or a business owner, it's your hard-earned money that you've either earned or you've raised for a cause or for your own family's wealth, and it's been taken away from you. So that's quite tough. And then from my point of view, so I really do emphasize with those that have got burnt, because they are getting more elaborate and smarter. So it's all, again, you can be a smart person and still get fooled. And then also as an owner of an accounting firm, it scares the hell out of me on a day-to-day basis when we're assisting our clients with managing their payments, to make sure that we've done enough to protect our clients and ourselves from that risk. And I think it's something you've got to be front of mind. You've got to refresh, just have it talking about it once when the staff member starts on day one is enough. It's saying, repetition, because it will fall off the radar because all these other things are more important, but it's got to come back to front of mind, because it's when you let your guard down, but these things could sneak through. And there's a financial cost involved, which typically you can't recoup. Yeah,
it's pretty frustrating. And yeah, not to be taken for granted, like it can happen to anyone. Maz, you just mentioned before, and I know you said you didn't want to mention that you'd been here for 30 years doing this stuff, but how has this changed for you? Like, you've obviously seen this evolve during that time. How has that changed for you and from your perspective?
Oh, look, I think, what I'm seeing now to what I saw, say, even 20 years ago, it is really, really frightening. And what's going to happen in the next 20 years is even more frightening, I think, with AI and things like that are about as well. But, I remember, being personally involved with a client of mine who, it was $150,000 of an invoice that was picked up in the ether, and the bank details changed on that invoice and then sent through to the client, who's actually here on the Northern Beaches. And unfortunately, if she hadn't have just had her wits about her that particular day, to notice that the bank account was slightly different, that could have potentially put them out of business. So that, and that I'm going back 20 years ago, that was when it all started. So now when we talk about the sophistication of what they're doing with text messages, and nobody is immune to this. Individuals, employees themselves are not immune, because they think, well, I'm working for the business is taking care of all that. To Brendan's point, it really is about repetition and talking to employees and making them aware of it. And some of the things that I think we can talk to them about to make them really aware is that it's potentially can happen to their grandparents, it could happen to their aunties, their uncles, and to themselves as well. So it's being vigilant. Yeah, being really being vigilant and trying to stay on top and not being frightened. I will share a story. While I've been here at Weel, I received an email from a potential client that I had been working with for 18 months, quite a big client. And I got an email from him, and it asked me to download something. So I opened that up, and I actually clicked on that box because it was from Dean. But then when there was nothing in the box, I then realized that potentially I could have done the wrong thing. I rang him and said, look, you've sent me this email, there's nothing in it. And he came back and said, Maz, I'm so sorry. You're the 5th person this morning that's told me. So then, having to then go to Russ, and Russ, Trent. So then having to go to Russ and say, hey, look, I think I've done the wrong thing here. I'm pretty sure I have. And then them being able to go and do the check, but doing it straight away and not waiting. I was very fortunate that there were no implications, but because of the processes, obviously, that we have to have in place in the back end. But, just if it happens, be upfront about it straight away, because they're out there and they're finding different ways all the time. Yeah.
You probably lead to a good point, right? So we're talking about, that it could happen. I think the piece we don't talk about is what happens if it does happen. Brendan, do you guys have a process or something that you recommend to clients? Like, hey, if this does happen, here's what you need to do, or here's the steps you need to follow?
Look, I haven't had one for a while, I must say. I've been lucky, but as I said, it's always on radar. Look, if a client rang me today and said, hey, I think we've paid money to the wrong place, if we're talking about those sort of things, as far as that invoice interception, which Maz mentioned earlier, there's a couple of things I'll be going to. One, going to the bank, letting them know to see if there's any chance they can put a stop on the payment. Might be too late, but it's worthwhile. Second one, there is, I think it's through ScamWatch, or there's a site there where you can report it, so that way they're aware of it. And I think that may or may not notify the police. I think it's worthwhile. Again, they are not involved with trying to collect the money for you, but at least, again, put it on the radar. Trying to put a stop on it. And then from there, I think your next one is then it's really going to be, put a pause on how you're doing your current process and look to see what else you need to change so you don't get, you don't be further exposed. So, I think if we're talking that sort of payment error, they're the couple of things I'd be doing straight away. And if we're talking more of an IT thing, then it's straight onto your IT provider, let them know you've clicked the link, or someone's clicked the link, and then take their guidance, because they're the experts in that field.
I mean, as you're saying all this, I realized, we have to do fire safety drills, which always feel like a waste of time, right? I'm like, it's a nice day outside. I just want to stay out here. One thing that we don't do is actually mandatory cybersecurity training, right? Like, when was the last time we all sat down and again, I know you're going to say half day is excessive or whatever it may be, but again, we all know stop, drop and roll, because it was edged into my head so clearly, if there's a fire, don't touch the handle, check underneath. All these things are in my head because we had to do it over and over and over. Do you know how many fires I've been in my life? None, 0. But I know all these things, right? And there's a point here, this wasn't where I thought this conversation would go, but we're here now anyway, where this probably should be mandatory training that is coming across your team, your clients, who's putting the mandatory payments behavior, ScamWatch type stuff into our operation model. Where does that happen in your team onboarding? Hey, in case of fire, hey, in case of scam, here's what you need to do. If you think something's gone wrong, see it, say it, sorted, whatever. here's who you need to go and speak to. So Maz, in your case, you knew something was wrong. I went and spoke to Russell, and then, there's a process that follows that. I think for the audience today, my question for you, feel free to put it in the chat. Actually, I'd be really keen to understand who has a process and has been through this training with your team. How do you approach this? Does your team know that if something happens, what's the next step? Who do they need to speak to? If you don't have an answer, then I think this is something worth looking at. I think this is something you should consider going, hey, we actually should level up and train our team, because these fraudsters and everything going on in the market, like, they're not stopping. Like, they're trying to find ways into your bank account every other day. And I think even with all this AI, like, normally I can spot a dodgy email ages away because the grammar is terrible. But if you use ChatGPT, like, these emails can come out better than most people that I deal with now, right? Like, it's comprehensive, and sometimes that's the giveaway these days. I'm like, oh, this feels like a robot wrote this. But if I just pivot off that for a sec, but my takeaway, and no one's put this in the chat yet, but I'm keen to hear, like, let me know, have you done training on this? Do you have a clear process for when things go bad or go wrong? What's your version of stop, drop, and roll? I'm keen to understand what that looks like for scams and fraud. Feel free to put that in the chat. Maz, coming to you, thinking through the different types of fraud. We talked about invoices and so forth. What are some of the other things that potentially come across your desk, or that you've seen or heard in the last 18 months?
I think there's a lot, and I was going to raise, the other one when we're talking about processes is credit card fraud. And this is, obviously you're giving me a really good segue here, Trent, because obviously that's one of the things that Weel helps navigate and mitigate, if you like. So I think fraud on credit cards is one, okay, which is a big one, and we're all aware of that. And there's lots of things that, a lot of challenges that come with that. Number one, if the card is defrauded, I've got to cancel it. I've got to go to the bank. I can take up to 6 weeks, I've been told, 8 weeks. One accountant was telling me, to get a new card. If you've got subscriptions on that card, ringing all the companies that you subscribe with, etc. That's one side of fraud. And I would be really keen to know if people do have processes around that. How do staff identify whether their card has been defrauded if they do have a card, and what are the precautions they're taking to try and stop that? That's one. I think another type of fraud, which a lot of people probably don't like to talk about, is staff fraud. And when I talk about staff fraud, I'm talking about reimbursements and putting in requests for funds to be paid back on certain things that you're actually purchasing supposedly on behalf of the business. Did you really take that client out to dinner, or was it your best mate and his wife, sort of thing? So there's a lot of different types of fraud and processes that people can they exaggerate a little bit on. So it's not just that standard stuff that we were talking about with invoices and those sorts of processes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, good. Lucinda just put in a good comment. And again, this is probably where my head was before as well. But as an employee in an organization, I feel we don't cover what to do in the event of if it happens. It's all about the processes in place to prevent it from happening. Definitely need to look into a process of what to do if it does happen. I totally agree, and I won't sort of labor on the point, but Lucinda, that's great. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for people sharing those different ways to check. So if you need to report an event, if you're in New Zealand, thank you, Kirsty, for sharing that. Justin, thank you for sharing your comment as well. If anyone's got any other things that they want to share in that chat, please do. This session should all be about how do we help each other, right? I probably want to talk a little bit about, cool. We know that these things can happen. We know that there's probably a gap in what do we do when things happen. And Brendan, I'll throw to you, and then Maz, I'll come back to you. But what are you doing to prevent these things? So session being mastering financial control. One of it is having a process. But Brendan, how do you go about doing this you can talk about it for one client's perspective. What's your end-to-end process that you're thinking through? And then I'll ask you a follow-up on doing this for all clients at some point as well.
Yeah. So I think the one thing, just to take a step back for a second, when we're thinking financial controls, it's not just fraud. The other part I always look at is basically, as a business owner, is being able to let go a little bit. but still have trust in the process. So a lot of these things, that the process things you'll go through, are to help protect fraud, but they're also to provide trust, but someone's actually taking accountability of what they're approving and the spend, so that someone's being accountable. And it might not be that it's fraud, but it might be oversight. An example, you've signed up to a software subscription and you're paying monthly, and someone's approving that bill every month going, I'm okay for a skip paying it. Where what could happen is no one's taking accountability, and all of a sudden you paid for something for 3 years you've never used. And you go, why are we still paying for this? So I think there's that part of financial controls as well. It's not just about the fraud, it's actually about someone, controlling your finances so that you know what's being spent, what you're earning. Because I had a meeting with a client the other day, they thought they were earning 10 grand a month, they're only earning 5, because no one actually checked their invoicing and bookings back to their bank account and worked out there was a gap. So those sort of things can really make a big difference to an organization. But coming back to your point, Trent, so end-to-end process, what is it? So to me, the first thing is about accountability and making that very clear. So whether you have a hierarchy of more than one person has to approve a certain payment or review a bank statement or a credit card statement, or the zero reports, but it's making it clear if someone is responsible. Where I've seen it go wrong before, they go, oh, look, we've got an entertainment budget. Jill and Michael look after that. So what happens? Jill says it's Michael's fault. Michael says it's Jill's fault, and then no one takes responsibility. So I think if you can, from a reporting point of view, with your chart of accounts or your account codes, is try to split those up and have one person in charge of different account codes. That gives you that accountability. So then if there are any issues or questions, you've got one person to go to and you don't have the whole pointing the figures. So I think once you've got it clear as to who's responsible for different type of costs, it's then working through, okay, well, how are you going to make payments? Are you going to use something like Weel? Are you going to do EFT payments? Are you going to use a normal credit card? And whatever that process is, making sure that that bank data then connects up with your accounting system, whether it's Xero, MYOB, or whatever, so it can be reconciled, regularly, and that you have different people involved in these processes. So segregation of duties, something you often hear about with controls, that's a really good one. So how that works in our organisation is we'll do the bookkeeping, but we don't make payments. So we might be involved in reviewing the bills that come in, but we don't touch our clients' bank accounts. So that allows, if someone's making payments and they don't provide us an invoice, we can flag to our contact and go, hey, this money came to the bank account, we haven't got a bill. We don't know what it's for. Where if you were doing basic, bookkeeping, accounting, and just doing cash book means, hey, we paid Telstra, we'll just go telephone. Oh, that's Optus, that's telephone. Just set up a rule. Well, no one realizes you've got 3 Telstra direct debits, 2 Optus direct debits every month coming out. But the bank rule works, so it's all good. Where if we got the actual invoices and worked out we're paying for this person's phone, this person's phone, this person's phone, this number that's disconnected, all of a sudden, again, there could be an element of fraud, could be just an element of oversight, which can make a big deal of difference. So I think it's those sort of things that I'll be looking at to give you comfort that if you are spending money, it's legitimate business expense, not just from a fraud perspective, but it's actually expenditure you wanted to occur. Because otherwise, that's money that can be in your back pocket to use somewhere else in your business.
Yeah, no, totally.
I agree with that too. I think it's having the rules in place to give your staff members or volunteers, whoever, the confidence to be able to spend because they know they can and it's going to the right places. So and it's being checked. So yeah, I think I agree 100% with that.
I think, Brendan, what I took out of your comments just for everyone is everyone's benefit, that delegation of duties was really key. So, we know who's doing what, not just having 2 people that are in charge of one thing. So, depending on the size of your team and how big, or whether you've got your bookkeeper accountant in the relationship that's doing some of that work, it's having a clear process that's communicated. Brendan, do you do any of that visually? Like, do you have a visual map of what that looks like for clients, or is that just in discussion?
Yeah, no, we've done a bit of a visual. We've created some visuals as well, because for a lot of clients, when you're trying to talk through this sort of change, when we come in, they may not be, they don't deal with this stuff day in, day out like we do, with debits and credits and this system and that system. So if you can visualize and have like a flow chart and go, right, here's our flow. it makes it really easy for someone to understand the process. And if you're going to like management over to get approval, go, hey, this is how we're going to change it. You then don't get stuck in all the technical part of it. Go, okay, this is what we're trying to do. This is the way it works. Okay, so-and-so is responsible here. Then it's this person. Then it's this person. Yeah, found that makes it really easy. So I think, you know, a simple flowchart type thing is really good. And it's really easy. If someone wants to do it differently, they can easily mark it up and go, no, shouldn't we do it this way? Or what about this? Yeah, so I find that's a great conversation starter when you're looking to try to put some financial controls in place, or really just any sort of controls and any sort of approvals for anything in your systems and processes.
Yeah, cool. Maz, from your side, you deal with hundreds of partners all the time, or accounting firm, bookkeeping firm partners. How do you, like, before you start working with them, what's that noticeable difference? So they come to you and they not have a good process or system in place to manage this control. And then I guess you fast forward 30 days, like what do you notice as the difference in their attitude, their approach, their awareness to putting these controls in?
Look, I think the biggest challenge is getting the right information at the right time. So, you know, being able to collect receipts is a really big one. A lot of accountants and bookkeepers that are doing that work, the bookkeeping work especially, not having access to the receipts and having to chase up the receipts all the time. And also not having the reports in real time. So they might be chasing receipts and the receipts are coming in, but they're from 2 months ago. So, and the books are already closed off from that time. You know, a really good example, Trent, when you were still here, you know, I think I shared this story with you. I'd only been in the organisation maybe 2 or 3 months, and I had one bookkeeper who was absolutely beside herself with her very first client, because she saved them over $120 a month. Not that that's got anything to do with it, but what she had identified, that she had a client where they were, to Brendan's point earlier, where they'd been paying a subscription for 18 months that they weren't even using. And the other one was they were doubling up on a subscription. So they were paying it twice, paying the same subscription twice, because 2 different people had actually requested the subscription. So by introducing some of those processes and some of the things that we offer in Weel, that gets eliminated. So I think it's definitely being able to see in real time what people are spending, and that streamlining straight up and going straight up into the accounting system to the correct expense category, and not having that time wasting of, you know, looking up the receipts. The other thing also is the card sharing. You know, people within businesses, and I was absolutely guilty of this where I worked before. We all knew our boss's Amex card. We had photos of it and we could use it. The problem with that, then, the inefficiency in that was that the girl in accounts, Alison, she struggled for weeks after every month trying to find out who purchased what. So they're the sorts of things that I think slow things down. Reports aren't reported in the right accounting periods. And then you're backtracking to try and fix those things up. And I think that's something that we've definitely helped. And I think, you know, Brendan, who uses Weel internally as well, you know, in his accounting practice and has clients, I think would attest to that being some of the things that streamline those processes and make it easier.
I just counted, I've got 18 subscription cards in my Weel account. And not to say that's not going to grow even more as we continue growing, but yeah, trying to manage it on one card is tough. I just made a few paused actually, because I'm like, I'm not using this. I'm just going to pause that, don't need that. It's good to be visually see all that though, right? Like you couldn't do that if you just had one card applied to it.
And I think that was what Robin was trying to say to me. It was, you know, she could see, I refer to it as the subscription asset register, because you can see exactly who you're subscribing to, how much it's costing you every month, and who's actually responsible for the card, which I think is important as well. And when we were talking about fraud earlier, if the card is defrauded, it's a click of a button and that card's gone. The transactions are still there. That's all still okay for previous transactions that have been made on the card, but the card's gone and you can create another one within 2 minutes. So again, you're not having to cancel multiple subscriptions, ringing multiple people, etc. So it's a very, very simple process. Click the button, cancel it, and create a new one. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So just to maximize the rest of the session, so we spent a lot about talking about problems that exist, even just some of the challenges we have trying to articulate this with the team. We talked about the importance of having process and what that controls kind of sound like. I just want to spend the last 10, 15 minutes maybe showing a little bit of what these controls look like in practice. Brendan, I want to start with you. We're going to talk about that approvals workflow builder. And I think specifically just focusing on, I guess, the flexibility, like the things that, how does this help you with these gaps and things that we're talking about? And then Maz, from your side, it'll be the same thing. I think just showing through how you're creating budgets, how you're using that subscription register to visualize and see all this stuff. But Brendan, I'll let you share first. And for your audience, this is to your benefit, I guess. Like if you're not using ApprovalMax or Weel or a system in general, this is designed to just give you a visual of how does this control look like in practice, or in not even in practice, in realness, in reality. How does this work in reality? I want to say in theory. I'm like, it's not theory either. This is actually how it's done. So Brendan, do you want to just talk us through what we're looking at here, mate?
So easy. All right, let's get the screen at a decent size. So what we're looking at here with ApprovalMax is the bill workflow. And so if we again think of the flowcharts type analogy, this basically is telling us, okay, what if we've got a bill? I think old school. I had a stamp, bill would get opened up, it'd go to someone's desk because they're the first approver. Then it would go to their manager, they get approved. Then it might go to finance and get the final tick of approval before it then goes and another trader then get paid. We've obviously moved past all those paper shuffling now because we're in 2023 and we all work from home. So hence, this is sort of doing that same process just electronically. So what I've got here is step one for approval, and then if certain conditions are met, a step two is required, and then a step three. So in this instance, if I go to my table here, I can see James Tedesco, he has to approve anything if the supplier matches program lead. So this was an old name I had. So basically I could change this for something else. I could say, hey, if it comes from Atani, which is a good software solution, links with Xero, if the bill's from Atani, they're the approver. But you know what? Otherwise, if it's not Atani, everything else, Pat can approve that for us, and I can go done. So now I know basically if it's Atani, it goes to James. If it's to do with something else, it goes to Pat. Now, the other way we can go in there is we can change that as well, and we can work off account codes. So that's where, if you think about it, that's probably more how a lot of it would be done. So we can then move to account codes. So if I get away from this and I go here, I can then pick my account codes. You can pick requester, amounts, all these sorts of things. I'm just trying to work on my account codes at the moment. They're not showing up. But
I was just going to say, I didn't realize Tedesco was also working in your accounting firm as well as fullback for the Roosters, man.
Look, I thought I'd just have a little bit of a sporting theme, given there's a lot happening at the moment. So we'll go back in and add James again. And so now, so basically any requester, supplier, and this is where I had my other tracking categories. So basically you can set all this up, which is quite cool. An alternative rule, pick an amount under. So you set up that first test. Then we go to the second test. I'm just going to get out of this, some stuff that up. I go to step two, and then I can say, well, actually, if it's above a certain amount for above 500, then it also needs to be approved by James. No matter what rules I've set, it then needs to be approved by James. And then step three, because I don't want to, I'm providing financial control to James and Pat to manage things. If it's over $5,000, then that's a bill I want to see. So what's really good about that is then I only see the bills I need to see. Otherwise, if there's a smaller bill and I've got an issue with it, I can check with James why he approved it. But the bigger ones don't go through unless I get oversight. So again, very simple flowchart rules. You can make them a lot more complicated if you need. But my clients love this process. We moved a lot of clients a number of years ago when they still had the paper stamp, had their rubber stamp. But now, as I said, 2023, most clients are trying to do this via email or Slack or Teams, and that obviously has its own risk in regards to what we talked about before with the whole data transmission. So doing it in a secured environment where you've got two-factor authentication access is awesome, and really does speed up the process and provide you an audit trail which gets attached into your accounting system, which is helpful for audit for end of year, which I think looks like Joe from New Zealand was mentioning on the chat earlier about their work in the school with the schools and charities.
Yeah, I just like the idea of being able to visualize this, right? And as you said, only the person that needs to see it will see it. And being able to route like different routes depending on the type of the bill and everything else. So yeah, I always enjoy looking at how these workflows are built in that sense, because it's flexible, it's easy to understand. Yeah, no, it's really cool. Well done. Any other comments on this, mate, before we flip over to Maz to look at the other side?
I think that's the main bit, I guess. It's just that simplicity of making a process which you're probably already doing and doing it electronically. It's great. And then when someone goes on leave, you can jump in and change the delegate and bang it all. It switches over, so things keep moving. So yeah, I think for anyone who's not approving everything themselves, this would be something to have a look at.
Nice. There is a question from Scott I'll ask, and I'll let you stop sharing your screen, and then Maz, I'll let you go through your side in a sec. Brendan, we're integrating ApprovalMax with Dext to build the bills. Is there an alternative to Dext that you recommend or that you use as part of this process at all?
Yeah, so we actually use Dext, but you could be looking at HubDoc, Data Molino, and there's a number of others out there. What we've done, you can have Dext go straight into ApprovalMax and then it goes to zero at the end. What we ended up doing, we've still got it going into zero first under awaiting approval, then from Dext, and then ApprovalMax kicks in. The reason we did that is clients did like to see those sort of awaiting approved bills within the Xero ecosystem. So that's why we sort of we didn't go Dext to ApprovalMax directly. But if you've got issue with Dext, there's a couple others out there, and yeah, happy for you to reach out afterwards to the ApprovalMax team, and I can try to feed you some to work out where your pain points are, and if I don't know how to solve them, I can provide some alternatives. Nice.
So what we've just been through is showing through how to visualize and what this control process looks like from ApprovalMax perspective. Maz, I'm going to ask you to show what this control process looks like with regards to budgets, subscriptions on the Weel side in terms of your card spend. Do you want to share your screen and talk us through that?
Okay, there are a couple of things here. I think because we were talking about subscriptions, I just quickly want to show what that looks like. So if you were setting up subscriptions within Weel, so this is the Weel application that I've just logged into here. So under payments, under subscriptions here, you can see here I've got 2, 4, 6 subscriptions. Or companies that I subscribe to. So very quickly, if somebody wanted another subscription for Dropbox, I can come in here and have a look, and I'm not going to actually pay that. I don't have to pay that subscription out. So this is the register that I was referring to. It's also very, very quick. The person that the subscription is allocated to is the person that has the card, has access to the card. If that person leaves, though, it's very easy to be able to come in and change that subscription card from one person to another. I also mentioned about deleting cards. This is how easy it is to come in and just delete that subscription. I can confirm that subscription's gone. Now I can just come back in, put the subscription in again, who's responsible for the card, what expense category is it going to, when's it being paid, and the monthly amount. This is another really important part. It's the maximum amount that can come off that card in any one payment. So from a fraud perspective, we were talking about if the card did get defrauded, they wouldn't be able to allocate more or select more than what we had put on that card. So that's subscriptions. But the other thing that we have in Weel is budgets. And this is the ability to be able to create a particular budget. A budget can be for an individual person, as you can see here, or it could be for a sales team. So you get the ability to be able to create a budget. It's just a bucket of money. It's I refer to it as a bucket of money, as most of the accountants and bookkeepers that I work with. You give the budget a name, specify how often you want that budget updated, weekly, monthly, yearly, or it's a one-time budget. So for not-for-profits, for example, if you're running a fundraising event, it might be a one-time budget. You're allocating $2,000 to be able to then hopefully go and make 10 times that amount of money. How much do you want allocated to that budget? Who are the people that can spend out of that budget? So you've got your bucket of money. Who are you allowing to spend out of that bucket? Who is the approver of the budget, the actual gatekeeper? I refer to them as the budget. And if you are allocating multiple people to the budget, you can actually set it up to give them limits as to how much they can spend. So the budget might be $2,000. I'm inviting 2 people in. I'm going to give one person $1,500 to spend and another person $500. And then you're also then allocating the expense categories for that budget. So people aren't having to worry about going through pages and pages of expense codes to try and determine what's the right one. So a budget looks like this. If I open this sales budget up here, I'll always know how much I've got available, how much I've spent, and I can actually see the people that are spending out of that budget. And if I click on that person, it shows me what they've actually spent. So as they are spending, as they're tapping and paying in real time, those transactions are coming through here into what I refer to as the Weel bank account. So there is no waiting for a transaction to come in, from a month before or a month later. Those transactions are appearing in here immediately, and you can start filtering on those transactions, and then they all get exported up into Xero, MyOb or QuickBooks as well. We were also talking very briefly about reimbursements. So we do have the ability with Weel, so that you're not having somebody gathering all those receipts, putting them on dashboards. And a perfect example of this is my husband, who came home to me the other day with a photo, because he's working for a builder at the moment, came home with a photo of a receipt for Kim Bricky. And on there, he had to put who the client was that he'd filled the truck up with before he'd taken it to the tip. So he takes the photo, typed on there in text who it was for, and he then sent that photo across to their accounts department. So needless to say, I'm on board now with the company that he's working with, because he could have taken a photo of that receipt. We use tracking categories as well in Weel that will go up into Xero. And that would have gone straight through to the accounts department and sitting in here in Weel. So she would have seen straight away what he had spent. And as I said, the receipt would have been attached, and all that goes straight up into, they're actually using Xero. So it just, again, streamlining that process, take a photo of the receipt, code it. It can be approved, and it can go through multiple approvers if it needs to, and then straight up into Xero. So that's just a little bit about Weel and what we do.
Cool, very good, love it. I'm going to pause for a sec. Thanks for showing that through, Maz. I just want to see any of the questions, queries coming through, and I'm just going to summarize some of this as well. Question from Christine was, do the transactions in Weel have receipts/invoices attached, and do they also get pushed through to Xero?
Absolutely, they do. So the receipts are attached to the transaction. They're pushed up to Xero. You can actually also, from that transaction list, choose to export all those transactions and save them somewhere else if you need to, because I know some of the not-for-profits, they need to be able to have those saved in another place, so you can do that as well.
Very good. Next one for Scott, from Scott, I should say. Card sharing in Weel. We're a small not-for-profit, can't afford to give away every team member to have their own card unless they're traveling. Is there any thoughts about how to do this safely? Bess, thoughts?
Look, you can't do anything. So you can share your phone. I mean, you can do that. You could also look. There are ways around this sort of stuff, but again, it's defrauding and it's not doing the right thing. It defeats the purpose. If it's a not-for-profit, I'd love the opportunity to chat to them. We always look to see what we can do from a pricing perspective. So yeah, if you reach out to me, let's see if we can organise something to do with the pricing. But it's definitely not something that we recommend in sharing.
Can I just add in, I guess, with the reimbursements, the one good thing about that, I've done that. So I had a Weel with my business, and I had to reimburse one of the guys because he got a train home from a work function or something, or an Uber, and I approved it, and he got paid like 10 seconds later. So there might be different ways, whether the card, if the reimbursements is a more cost-effective way to do it. Maybe if you can get the approvals done quick enough, that might be another way to work around it. Because the good thing is it's a real-time reimbursements from what I've experienced with my staff. It's not like it's get paid next Friday when we do payments. So that's a real popular thing I've found with my staff.
Yeah, as soon as the reimbursement comes in, it can have multi-level approvers as well. If the reimbursement's over 500, it needs to go to multiple people. If it's under, it doesn't need to. And you're absolutely right, Brendan. It can be back in someone's bank account within the hour, really.
I had a question from Jade. I think, Jade, my follow-up is probably just if you can be a little bit more specific on who's the question for, if it's for Brendan or Maz, only because for Maz. Okay, cool. Are there any plans to allow an admin to see all the increased requests and or allow the approver to delegate approvals to someone else when they leave?
Yes, is the short answer. Absolutely. It is on the roadmap. There are some very big changes happening at Weel, which, you know, as Trent knows, I never sell tomorrow's bread because it's not baked. So, but there are things that are in the pipeline, and I can assure you that they are on the roadmap, but I can't give you a time as to when they will be available at this stage.
You're better than me, Maz. I would have said all the things that were coming, which is good. Cool. Thanks for your questions, everyone. If everyone's got any more questions, you can add them in. Before we end the session, I'm just summarizing what we've done today. So we talked through a lot of the problems that we're experiencing and the fact that they exist. And I think it's being vigilant, being proactive. We talked about the idea of stop, drop and roll and what that looks like for you with your team. Kirsty, your comment I'm still thinking about from before was that you test your team members all the time on this. And I think you said not one of them are passing, even though it's a low level piece. And that in itself is worrying. So I think, you know, how are we better educating team members on how to prevent this? And if something does go wrong, what are we doing? What's your emergency meeting point? Again, if you want to keep using the fire analogy as your best example of what does this look like and how do we make sure people are across it? Maybe you need a fire marshal, right? Maybe you need a cybersecurity payments marshal of sorts that's in charge of this stuff and making sure your team are across that. I think, you know, we've got first aid respondents on, so like all those things are good analogies for ways you can better tackle this and have responsibilities, clear communication and everything else. We talked about practically, like, how do we put process and controls in place? How does that sound? How are we doing that with team members? How are we doing it with clients? Brendan, you talked about that segregation of different duties. So, you know, you guys don't do payments, but you do everything. You do the approvals part, where a client will do the payments piece. And then we visually showed what that looked like if you are going to use tools like ApprovalMax and Weel, which obviously I recommend doing. I mean, you're here because you're in the marketing list for these amazing companies. So hopefully you're already doing something or you're thinking about doing something. We showed through some of that as well. So hopefully you got some good bits and pieces out of that. Before we wrap, I'm going to just ask a quick little poll to understand if you need more info from either ApprovalMax or Weel. It's single choice. So you can say, I want to hear from ApprovalMax, or I want to hear from Weel, or I want to hear from both. There might be an email, there might be a follow-up, something along those lines, or it just might be no thank you, and that's totally cool. I hope you've had a good day and you've enjoyed catching up with us. I hope you've walked away learning something, because that is always the benefit. I'm going to ask one more question for Maz, I think, from, this is Marion. Not Marianne, Marion. Is there a way for reimbursements under Weel can be pushed into Xero MyOb directly? I've noticed that we have to manually add in reimbursements into the accounting system. As they don't get exported, it always comes out as pending export.
The reimbursements actually do get pushed through to Xero, MyOb and QuickBooks as well. So I'd suggest that there may be something there that we need to check, and that might be a technical thing, because the reimbursements definitely are, it is all programmed to actually go through to Xero as well. So maybe Marion, if you could reach out to either myself or to our help desk, customer service at letsweel.com. Somebody will definitely have a look at that for you. But all our transactions, reimbursements, subscriptions, and any card payments all go straight up into Xero, My Oval QuickBooks.
Awesome, very good. Thank you, Maz. Thank you for coming along. That's our session. That's a wrap. So hopefully you've had a good time today. Feel free to put any comments into the chat. If you've enjoyed the session, let us know. If there's something we missed that you think we should have spoken about, let us know. We can always do these sessions again. We hope it's been practical. I'm always hoping that you're walking away with something going, oh, I didn't know that. I hadn't thought about that. That's great. That's the whole point of you being here. Otherwise, Brendan, thank you so much for your time. Maz, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And yeah, look forward to catching up with you all again very, very soon.
My pleasure. And thanks to everybody for attending. It was great. Thank you. Thanks, Trent. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, Maz. Thanks, Trent. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful afternoon. Talk to you all soon.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.